Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Corporate Parenting Committee. Welcome to everybody, councillors and officers who are attending. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you could keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. Keeping cameras off is really there if you're struggling with bandwidth. So in the meantime, I don't mind if people have their cameras on. And this meeting is being recorded. If you do wish to speak, it's probably easier if you use the raise hand facility, which I can then see. I think that's it. Right, so first of all, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have got councillors Joss Saunders, Councillor Mick Warren. He might be arriving late. He's taking his mum for a vaccine jab. We've got visiting member Arthur Moran, and we've got officer apologies Mark Palethorpe and Keith Martin.
Right, thanks very much. And also, as Councillor Barber, I believe, is quite poorly with COVID, so he may not have been able to send his apologies, but I think that's the reason he's not here today. Just before we carry on, we've got Nick with us. Do you want to introduce yourself, because we haven't seen you before on this committee, Nick?
Hi, thank you very much, Councillor. So hi everybody, so my name is Nick Crick. I'm the interim head of service for cared for services and care leavers. So I've been in Cheshire East for just over a month now. I'm here as an interim, as an agency senior officer, but thank you very much for inviting me along this afternoon.
Great, thank you and welcome. Do we have any declarations of interest from anybody on any of the items? No. Okay. So then we have the minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 10. I believe we had good attendance at that meeting. So are there any issues of accuracy that anybody wants to raise from those minutes? No. Okay, well, I propose that we accept those minutes as a true record of the meeting. Does anybody, I'm going to take a sense of the meeting. Does anybody have any objection to that? Is everybody happy with accepting those minutes? Let me know if you're not. Okay, thank you. Those are carried. Thank you, Helen. Great. So on to the business of the meeting. So we've had an awful lot of change since the last time we met in November. And we've now got our schools are closed. We've heard that our exams have been cancelled and there are all sorts of things going on. But I know that over this period, and no matter how difficult it gets, our teams are really still supporting our care for children and care leavers really, really well. And it's almost like now all the really hard work was done back in March, April, May to sort of get used to a new way of working. And now it kind of seems that it's just running really smoothly. So really well done, and thank you to everyone for your continued hard work with that. So first, the next thing on the agenda is the Corporate Parenting Committee update report. So I'm going to hand over to Kerry, who's going to present that for us.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Great to be here and nice to see some familiar faces. So thanks for having us again today. So Nick is supporting me at the moment in the interim head of service role for Cared for Children, but I'm going to present the detail, but we're both here to be able to answer any questions or queries that you may have. With your permission, Chair, I'd like to try and bring committee a little bit more up to speed than what's contained within the report, because the context is so different today.
Yeah.
It's a missed opportunity if I don't describe what the as is looks like. So you've got the report there for your information, and really that reflects the journey of the service supporting our children and young people up until November and December time. But of course, since then we've moved from tier 2 into lockdown, and so whilst Councillor Faval is absolutely right, we're almost a well-oiled machine now in terms of the way that we continue to work with our children and young people. The impact for them is where we really need to focus our attention. And so what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about today is the areas of our service and the particular issues that our children and young people are experiencing as a result of this lockdown. So what I'll start by saying is that the regulations that guide us as social workers continues to be the same set of regulations that were in place from April, that were reviewed in September and will be in place until the end of March. So our duty to be out and about visiting children and families in person continues to be the case. And I'm really pleased to say that we've had lots of positive feedback from our frontline colleagues that tell us that they feel really well supported by the officers in the service and yourselves when you can, you have those opportunities to give that thanks back. Our frontline are feeling very supported, and actually without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. So so the thanks is really appreciated, Councillor Faval, on behalf of elected members. So those regulations still stay in place, but what's different about this lockdown and what's an update to the report is the government announcement really around what lockdown meant for vulnerable children going into education. Now, in the initial stages of lockdown back in March, the guidance was quite clear that cared for children fit very clearly into the category of a vulnerable child, and therefore those children needed to be in school. This time round, it's ever so slightly different. And of course, our carers have got much more knowledge and information, as have our parents, as have children and young people themselves, and are making more informed decisions about what coronavirus and the risks of coronavirus mean for them. So the biggest piece of work for us to focus on as we entered into this new lockdown was understanding our children in terms of who was in school, who wasn't in school, and for those that weren't in school, what did that mean in terms of their vulnerability? And so we were quite quick really to do a big scoping exercise to know exactly where all of our children were. So of our population of 534, Nick, you'll correct me if I'm wrong there today, he's nodding, we've got around 150 children who are not, 150 cared for children who are not in education. Now, that doesn't mean that they're vulnerable in a safeguarding sense. There's a whole abundance of reasons as to why those children, based on risk, have made the decision within their family context not to be in education. And it might be that their carers, for example, are particularly vulnerable or clinically extremely vulnerable, or children and young people themselves are not feeling comfortable about going back into education at this time. And I just wanted to offer that reassurance really at committee today, that we are clear about who our children are, we are risk assessing all of their individual situations, and we are taking the challenge back to our partnership through the Safeguarding Children's Partnership to be clear that actually health need to support us, police need to support us, and school need to support us in putting a clear plan around those children. A, that means that they're not vulnerable to a safeguarding risk, and B, that their educational outcomes are not compromised, because what we know and what myself and other officers talk to you about frequently is the educational outcomes for our cared for children were more challenged before COVID, and so we have to be careful that we don't exacerbate that challenge for our children and young people really. So that was one of our greatest challenges really as we'd entered into this lockdown period. The way that we've continued to support family time for our children and families has remained the same. So not only is this a statutory responsibility, but actually we know that it's really important for our children to be connected with their birth families, and so have been able to maintain that same level of service delivery in a safe way. So children are still seeing their families, and I hope that that's welcome news for yourselves. I think an area that is really interesting is the way that permanency is able to progress in these times. So again, you'll know that I was really worried at the beginning of the pandemic about the impact of the courts closing and what that meant for particular cohorts of children and young people, and particularly for our children who were living with their adoptive parents and really just reaching for that final order but not able to get it because of the court capacity. I'm really pleased to say that we've had 12 adoptions now, which comparative to 14 last year isn't bad going. So between the challenge that we've put back into the local family justice boards and actually the great efforts that the courts have made, to make sure that there's an even spread of prioritisation. So the courts deal with any new and emerging cases, but they also have a responsibility to make sure that children achieving permanency get a place at the table. And what I can say is that is now really moving at pace and in the right direction. There are still some children who are before the court where early permanency decisions are being made. So I'll give you an example. Children have been through the child protection process and maybe things aren't improving and we need to go into court. The court give a guideline of around 26 weeks. Now we are still seeing drifting delay within those 26 weeks and cases going beyond 26 weeks. We often have to bring in court experts. Their ability to see children face to face has also been impacted by COVID. So it's good news in relation to the children with adoption. We've still got more work to do around drifting delay in terms of making those permanency decisions for children earlier on in their journey. The other part of the service that you'll know that we're working really hard on is making sure that where children don't need to be in care, they're not in care. And that is how it's described as revocation or discharge of care orders. So we have had a number, I think we've had 6, Nick, I'm looking at Nick again, 6 children who are no longer in care.
Yes.
Thanks, Nick, thank you for that. But actually we've got quite a number of children, we've got around 50 children that we want to move through the system so that they're no longer in care. And so that's quite a pressure on us, that's quite a pressure on the court, and actually what we don't want is children in care if they don't need to be. So that's where our focus attention is now with the courts, about how can we safely manage making quick and the right decisions for those children and young people, really. So that's a flavour really of, so some of it's business as usual, some of it's been created by the new lockdown. I think I would like to draw your attention to our care leaver cohort. They are a really vulnerable cohort, and I don't want to label our care experienced adults, but by we've spoken at various times, even today, about the impact of living alone and what that can mean in terms of isolation. And we've got young adults who have transitioned to adulthood earlier than we would have naturally expected that to happen if they were in their own birth families. And then now they've got these layers of COVID complexity. And so we're always thinking about ways that we can keep in contact with them, keep reaching out to them to say, we're your corporate parents, we're here, we want to help you. And one of the things that we've done really recently, Councillor Buckley, I'm sure this will be of interest to you, is we've commissioned with the CCGs a service through emotional wellbeing and fitness online training for our care experienced adults. So they've now got the ability to have free access to targeted intervention that is aimed at improving their emotional wellbeing and mental health online, and they've got the devices and the internet connection to be able to access those courses. So at the moment we've got about a cohort of about 300 care experienced adults between 18 and 25, and we've just put our first 15 young adults forward to be part of that programme, and we want to see that grow. That's just one example really of the ways that we're thinking differently. And another would be in relation to NEAT, to make sure that we are doing everything that we can in as creative way as possible. We've got a little bit of money set aside where we've got a care leaver mentor who is supporting our current care leavers to set up social enterprise businesses, and really pleased to tell you that we've got one young lady who we've been able to invest in to seek employment self-employed, where she's developed maternity bags for new mums, and she's now able to trade on a reputable website as a way of generating employment for herself. So we've got lots of corporate challenges. You will all know about the impact of employability of COVID. What we're really trying to do is say to our care leavers, what is going to help you and what kinds of things are you interested in? It might not be apprenticeships or internships, and it's these little bits that we're thinking about that hopefully will start to have some quite significant impact for our children and young people. So Laura Rogerson will be joining us for Education Update. She will be able to talk to you about well, not necessarily about attainment, because actually we don't have attainment data in the same way that we have had in previous years. But for education questions, I would direct you towards Laura, and I'll come on to fostering and sufficiency later on in the agenda, really. But I don't know if Councillor Faval, that would be a natural point for me to hand over for any questions, comments.
Yes, thank you for that, Kerry, and some nice good news stories. I love this this section on, as you say, the care experience adults and offering them extra support, particularly during COVID, because like you say, it must have been quite tricky for them. So I'm glad that that's going somewhere. Does anybody have any questions on this report or relating to anything that Kerry's just talked to us about? Councillor Buckley?
It's not so much a question. I just think you seem like you've been doing really well throughout all of this. And I keep hearing people saying that some children haven't got access to devices, but my understanding is all the Care for children have been accommodated. And I know you're only dealing with cared for children, but would you say on the whole in Cheshire East that there's been a pretty good push made by the schools, etc., to make sure that everybody's got access one way or another?
Absolutely, and I say that with real confidence, really. Yeah. So in my new role, Councillor Buckley, I'm obviously responsible for all of the vulnerable children in Cheshire East, and work very, very closely with the Director of Education, Jackie Forster, who has not only been clear from a local authority perspective about accessibility to remote learning, but has also been met with real want and desire to work together from our schools. So when I talk to you about identifying vulnerable children who are not in education, we've done that for all vulnerable children, from early help through to cared for children. We've got a clear list of who they are, but actually there's been no pushback from schools to say, actually, if you need a place, you can't have one. The schools have been open and welcoming, and where remote learning is part of that child's plan, that that's in line with their needs, that access to remote devices and internet connection has been put in place. So there may be one or two people. There's always one or two in the context of thousands of children, isn't there? But I just want to offer that reassurance, really, from my perspective. It's
because you keep hearing it in the media, don't you? People keep saying, and I keep thinking, well, everything I'm hearing, and I'm not coming across anybody that I know personally who's saying, oh, my child or my child's friend hasn't been able. Everybody I seem to know seems like they're getting something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue, we're talking about two things here, because our cared for children were obviously made sure that we had that they all had the devices, but we do have a number of children who who are just vulnerable children who may not have had, and I think we certainly sent out all the ones we have in Cheshire East, but then it was changed so that the schools applied directly to the DfE for their devices. So we certainly insured all of the care for children, and some of our vulnerable children did have, but then it's a case of applying. We have had quite a few businesses approach us and say we've got spare. So again, we've got spare equipment, and we've been directing them to schools as well. So it is happening. But I think what Jackie would certainly say about this is that and I tend to agree. Certainly for primary school children, maybe they need a bit more of a blended sort of remote learning with some sort of workbooks and that sort of thing as well, because we rely so much on technology, don't we, and often that's more difficult for younger children to stick with and do independently. And if you've got parents who don't understand how it works, which we do quite often, it can be even more challenging for them. I've been trying to push the BBC are doing some fantastic primary programmes every day, 3 hours of primary lessons, live TV lessons, which means no technology, no modern technology required, just television.
No downloading.
Nothing too complicated. Anyway, so that's great. Does anybody else have right, Nick, do you want to say something on that?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I just really wanted to add to Kerry's update that we've also looked to reach out to our care experience young people. We're going to be sending them a letter end of this week from ourselves as corporate parents, just reaching out to them, again, recognising how they are isolated and on their own. And it's just really as a partnership to let them know they're not on their own, and obviously they can make contact with us, and information around partnership, support from mental health to health, and of course from My Voice. the Child in Care Council, to encourage young people to be engaged and to let them know, how to contact their personal advisors and to make contact with partnerships as well. So I think it's another good example of what we're doing in Cheshire East, just to reach out and make sure our care experience young people are not on their own and they always feel supported.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions? I got a couple of points I wanted to raise, but they are more leaning towards the education. So do you want me to wait until Laura comes in? Or
I would always try and be as helpful as I can, but she's certainly the expert.
Well, let me ask anyway, because if you can clear it up, then we
Sure.
can move on. First of all, you mentioned that during this lockdown, out of our 534, there are 150 odd not in education. How does that compare with the first time? Weren't we around about sort of 92, 93% attendance of our cared for?
We're certainly seeing an increase in the number of children not in education. And I hypothesize, and I say that because at the moment we're into week 2, approaching week 3 of lockdown, and actually it's been quite a task to scope out thousands of children from early help to children's social care. There's bigger numbers of children not in education open to the child and need child protection teams. So as a local authority, we've got greater influence in being able to support young people who are cared for back into education, because we're the corporate parents, we share the parental responsibility, whereas children in child and need child protection, of course, their parents have the final say, and that's quite right. So it's a balancing act, Councillor Faval, because this is all about preserving the sensitivities around children's homes in foster care. I'm sad to report that actually last week we had a little 3-month-old baby who we had to move from a foster placement because both of her carers contracted COVID and one of them needed to go into hospital. So it's not without risk. And so actually children being in education there could be a greater risk of transmitting to carers and children losing their home. And so actually for all of those children that are not in, there will be a multi-agency risk assessment that says, actually as a local authority, we're happy with this, and this is what we will put in place to make sure that child receives an education. So it's,
Well, that's great. Yeah. That's fine. That answers that question. Thank you for that. The other one was just about, and this was from the personal education plans completion. In the minutes, the last meeting, we talked about there were about 55% being completed within the window, and there was a target of getting to 90% by Christmas. So I just wondered whether that happened.
I don't know whether that happened. What I do know is that we will need to relook at that target because, of course, the landscape has completely changed. Yeah. So what you'll know is that as we transitioned out of the last lockdown, so lockdown number 2, we prioritised children in transition groups and children in key stages that were then taking SATs, and therefore comparatively that would replicate a PEP completion level of around 50 or 60%. Now, of course, the landscape's changed and the DfE guidance is quite ambivalent in terms of children should or could be in education, and so what we need to ensure is that actually all children, regardless of where they're educated, should have a PEP. The guidance, the coronavirus regulations are clear that we still have a statutory responsibility to do that. But obviously the demands upon school, because they are the leader of the completion of this piece of work, that's also a challenge because they've got staff that are out, they're educating key worker children and vulnerable children. So I don't have the concrete answer. What I would suggest, Councillor Faval, is if we bring a more detailed update to the next committee that can then describe to you how we've managed that from a virtual school perspective.
Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
Then you've got that. Okay, brilliant.
Right, so if there are no more questions, then I propose that we accept that report, receive that report, and continue to, well, I believe we've offered scrutiny. Do we need to have a vote on this, Helen? Just remind me.
You could just take a sense of the meeting if there was anybody that had anything they wanted to add or change. But.
Yeah, if anybody wants to make any further comment before we receive that, please speak now. Okay, so everybody's happy with that report. So thank you very much, and thank you for presenting it. That's great. Okay, moving on. We're on to the health one, I believe.
I'll just share the presentation if that's all right.
And is it Sian or Shan?
It is Sian, yeah.
Sian, right, okay, so welcome Sian. So we'll hand over to you for this update on the Cared For Children Health. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you've all received the annual report in paper form, and it relates to the year 2019-20. I think what's quite important to mention at this point was that sort of towards the end of that year, COVID was beginning to emerge, and it did have an impact on some of the work in the very last quarter of the year, as you'll see as we're going through the presentation. Okay, so may I have the first slide, please? So this was just to highlight really the CCG responsibilities, and there's key legislation that actually informs our responsibilities. Promoting the health of looked after children, statutory guidance 2015 is the main document that we as the NHS work from, but also the Children Act 1989 and the update 2004. And then there's an intercollegiate role framework for the competences of health professionals working with looked after children, also that we refer to. A new one was published in December 2020. So as a CCG, we recognise that caring for children is a shared responsibility right across the health economy and the wider partnership, and as was the two Cheshire CCGs. So this report relates to Eastern Cheshire CCG and South Cheshire CCG. Of course, you will be aware that in April 2020, the four Cheshire CCGs merged and became NHS Cheshire. But for the purpose of this report, we're still referring to the two CCGs. And they were the responsible commissioners for all children who were brought into the care of Cheshire East Council. Okay, we can have the next slide. So the number of cared for children on the 31st of March 2020 was 533. It's interesting that Kerry mentioned that today there's 534. So there's not been a massive shift, but that was a 10% increase on the previous year. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but over 3 years, I think it's gone up by about 24%. In addition to those children, there were also approximately 170 children placed in Cheshire East by other local authorities, and our health services are actually required to provide a health service for those children and young people also. I would say at this point that children and young people placed in Cheshire East by other local authorities actually receive the same service that our Cheshire East children and young people receive. That can't be said for every area across England. That is quite a big issue that NHS England are looking at the moment, where they've recognised, and I have put a piece in the report about this, around unwanted variation across England, and that's in the quality of arrangements for health services for our looked after children. And it was highlighted in the CQC report in 2016, not seen, not heard. What they're actually saying is that the access to timely health services for looked after children varies across England, and it shouldn't. Access for mental health services for looked after children and care leavers, again, can be variable across England. And structures and systems to support teams also varies. I feel very confident that we can say in Cheshire East that any children placed here are receiving a timely service, and you know, it doesn't matter where they come from. Part of my job tends to be challenging the areas where our Cheshire East children are placed, and making sure that they get the same service in the area where they're living. The next slide, please. So what I've put down here is just how we've performed in terms of compliance with our statutory health assessments. So I'm sure that you'll all be aware that there is a statutory requirement for all children as they enter care to have an initial health assessment within 20 days. And that initial health assessment is completed by a qualified medical practitioner. In our case, it's a paediatrician that completes all initial health assessments. Now, although you can see in the table that performance was still variable across 1920, we have seen quite a considerable improvement from the previous 2 years. What you can see in Q4 was there was a very significant drop in completion of initial health assessments within 20 days, and that was due to capacity within the clinics. There was no other reason for it. We had doctors that were isolating due to COVID and staff sickness, and very rapidly that was addressed, and they were all caught up within Q1 of the following year. But that is the reason for that drop. What I would also say, although you will see this in the annual report that I present for 2021, is that we've seen further improvement in timescales, and I've been really sort of very happy and encouraged by performance up to date for this year. When we've looked at any late completion, because I scrutinise all initial health assessments that are late, and when we look at the themes for why they've been completed late, there've been late requests, appointments that have been cancelled. Sometimes it's because a child has been unwell, sometimes it's because a carer has been unwell. We've had a couple that have been cancelled because the child has also been due to have contact with their birth family. And if there's been no sort of immediate concerns regarding the health, that's taken priority. And we've had children and young people that have declined to attend as well. So we've had to create ways to engage with these children and young people to get their health assessed. Any cancelled and unattended appointments are always escalated to the social workers. As I said, I've mentioned the reasons for the drop in Q4. We recognised that there was still further work to be done to continue this improvement with our initial health assessment timescales. So during this year, although it's been challenging because obviously along with the other issues we've had COVID to contend with, but we have reviewed the escalation pathway for late requests. There's greater scrutiny of cancelled appointments. There's been some training provided for social care staff, so social workers when they're new into post, the issues that the work that they have to complete around a child entering care is complex and a lot of it. So we've made sure that they're aware of the requirement that they have to request initial health assessments. And we're also looking at the actual process itself and trying to make it less complicated and more streamlined with a single point of contact. So as I say, through this year, we're already seeing some improvements there. Now, with your review health assessments, again, we can see that there's the performance. I mean, I think it's consistently been above 80%, 85% for children placed in area. What you can also see in this table is during 2018-19, for our children placed out of area, they were the ones that were more likely to experience a delay in their health assessment being completed. That one of the reasons we found for that was that it was really difficult to influence timescales in an area that we didn't have any influence over, basically. But what you can see in 1920 is there's been a very significant improvement in those timescales, and that has been due to a very robust escalation pathway, whereby now our specialist nurses escalate to me if there's any delay. And what I've been doing is making contact with my equivalent in the area where the child's placed. And we've had a huge amount of cooperation and support in getting those health assessments completed. So I'm really, really pleased with the improvements that we can see for our children placed out of area. Okay, could we have the next slide, please? Our key performance indicators. So this is the data that's submitted as an annual return, and the statistics for children across Cheshire East. In terms of dental checks, you can see that stayed fairly consistent, although it's lower than want it to be. What the committee also needs to be aware of is that currently we're experiencing extreme difficulties with accessing dental services for our cared for children. That is obviously due to COVID and the fact that in the very early days dental services were stopped completely. When they did start offering face-to-face appointments again, they were working at about 40% capacity, just because of the time it takes between patients to clean surgeries. This isn't an issue that is local just to Cheshire East, it's a national issue, and the Chief Dental Officer, Sarah Hurley, is very aware of this and is working with the National Network of Designated Health Professionals to try and create a commissioning pathway that makes sure that dental checks and dental services for looked after children nationally is addressed as a priority. We are able to access any urgent dental care, but what we will see at the end of 2021 is that figure will be reduced. Immunisations at the end of 2019-20 were excellent, way above the national average. We've always performed well in that area, but we seem to have improvement year on year there, so I'm really pleased with that. Developmental checks, again, we always perform really well with that. When we've explored this, these were developmental checks at the very end of the year, a very small number of children where it didn't go ahead face to face, but they've been caught up with now. Care leaver health summaries. So this is the health summary that a young person, when they reach, oh gosh, I'm very sorry. Sorry, I thought I had that on mute. That's really bad, isn't it? Yeah, care leaver health summaries. At the end of 2019-20, 100% of our care leavers received a summary of their health. We're really lucky in Cheshire East because we actually have a care leaver and transition nurse, which is not a post that's replicated in other areas. Sorry, this person's been very persistent. It's not replicated in other areas, but our 16 plus and transition nurse actually sees care leavers up to the age of 25 and does some amazing work with them. And part of that is actually, you know, sort of making sure that the care leaver health summaries are completed and that they leave care with a really good piece of information about their health history. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So throughout the year, with all the health assessments and all the health intervention that has been provided by our specialist cared for children's team, the themes identified are pretty much what we would expect to see, and we do see consistently year on year. Emotional well-being issues, in particular related to difficulties with attachment and previous trauma, mental health disorders, ADHD, sleep problems, smoking and substance use, some complex physical health needs, social communication difficulties, and then exploitation, missing from home, and self-harm. As I say, they tend to be themes that are identified sort of very consistently with this particular group of children and young people who are very vulnerable. We've identified some gaps and risks as well that have been put forward for further work, and they've been around sort of support for attachment difficulties, mental and emotional support for our care leavers up to the age of 25. As I mentioned before, children who are placed out of area accessing health services. I've had a lot of involvement with that in the last 18 months, I would say, and also children placed in Cheshire East by other local authorities. There are risks associated with that have been escalated and are being reviewed nationally. And then we have set some priorities for 2020-21. If we could just have the next one. So as I was saying before, we need to continue to review the arrangements for initial health assessments and just try and streamline the process, take away some of the layers that currently exist. And I am in the process of trying to put together a proposal for a centralised service. We set as a priority also review of the strengths and difficulties questionnaire strategy. There has been some work completed around that. However, I think we could say with quite a lot of the work that was set out at the beginning of the year, COVID has had an impact on some of the meetings that were taking place. So that is a piece of work that's ongoing. A quality assurance visit to the provider. Now that was set as a priority, and what I've had to do is, instead of actually visiting provider services, is I've had fortnightly meetings with the provider and getting regular position statements from them. So although I haven't actually physically been in with the service, I've had very, very close contact. We're looking at development of an effective tool to measure health outcomes. Now, this is not just, again, this is something that is a piece of work being completed across Cheshire and Merseyside. Currently, the reports that are generated tend to be quite based on numerical data. And we're looking at ways of getting some really good qualitative measures for health outcomes. And as soon as that's developed, that will be something that I would be really happy to share with the committee. And then again, just making sure that all our documents and services that we are providing for our cared for children and young people are what they want, that they're appropriate, and that, you know, sort of that they add value for the children and young people themselves. Development of a robust system to ensure effective tracking and monitoring. We've got a system in place that seems to be working really well. We've got all our children now who are placed out of area. Our nurses do what they call a RAG rating system, so we're confident that we're aware of the health needs of our children placed out of area and the services that they're accessing. So although, you know, sort of as I say, 2020-21 hasn't been particularly easy in addressing these priorities, we still are managing to get some work done in those areas. And I think that is it. Does anybody have any questions for me? That was a really quick whistle-stop tour. Are you on mute, Councillor Favell?
I'm on mute. Thank you. Yeah, I've got one or two questions I want to ask. I thought I'll open it up to other members first. If there's anybody else who wants to speak on that, I have a hand up from Councillor Ballman.
Hi.
Carol?
Hello. I'm trying to find the face on the screen. I can't do it. There you are.
There you are.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the work that you do. It's horrifying to think of quite young children placed out of area and things. It's, you know, I just wondered, how does the nurse do that health visit? Do they go and visit them out of area children, or is it done virtually?
No. So what happens with our children if they are outside of the Cheshire East area? We have a notification system. So our equivalent team in the area where the child is placed will receive a notification and a handover from our nurses. Wow. Any health services that they're accessing, such as an ADHD service or an outpatient hospital service for whatever reason, or speech and language therapy or anything like that, any ongoing health needs, they're also handed over and picked up in the area where the child is placed. if we discover, when we make contact with the receiving area, if we discover that actually they don't have the same level of service that we provide, then I will ask our nurses to remain as a caseload holder. Not particularly from Cheshire East, but I have had nurses from Cheshire West that have travelled to, you know, sort of quite significant distances to visit children, young people, and make sure that their health needs are being met. So we've got a really good oversight of all our children.
Yeah, I don't suppose they're always thrilled to get their dental appointments, but long term, it's really good that that's happening. So well done. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Holland.
Yes, afternoon. Hi, how are you? I was just curious about, I was looking at 18.3 on page 36 regarding immunisations, and it just said at the bottom of that, an audit to determine if this has been affected early part of 2020-21. I just wondered whether that has improved the immunisations, and a question for me to understand how it's done. So if a cared for child, an asylum seeker is with foster carers, do they go to a clinic? Obviously, during COVID, probably not possible, but would they normally go to a clinic to get immunisations? It's just to understand the process, really. Or in certain circumstances, can a nurse go to them and administer immunisations? And the first question of the part of the question was, has it improved? Thank you.
Yeah. So if they are a child below school age, they would receive their immunisations as part of the National Healthy Child programme, and that would be in the same way that children who are not in care would be immunised, and that's through in the practice they have clinic sessions for immunisations for school age children. All our cared for children are included in the schools immunisation programme, so those are done in schools. What we did find was that actually the impact was far less than we thought it would be, because during the first lockdown, when schools were closed, there weren't any active immunisation campaigns that they needed to catch up with. So it had less of an impact than we thought it would. For our unaccompanied asylum seekers, when they enter care, unless they have evidence of their immunisation status, we would assume that their immunisation status was incomplete. Obviously, different countries have different programmes, and it's all very different to here. So we would assume that their immunisation status is incomplete, and they are started on what they call a catch-up campaign, and that is done through their GP. So it would be an initial health assessment for an unaccompanied asylum seeking young person. It would be one of the health actions identified would be to begin the catch-up immunisation programme via their GP. So there's a variety. We have explored, and it's definitely something that could possibly happen at some point in the future for our children, young people that really struggle to access immunisations via the mainstream route, that we may end up with immunisers that can visit children at home. I've done it before in other areas. There's no reason why we can't do it, and that could just be a sort of an add-on really to what we're already doing. But our performance in Cheshire East for immunisations is excellent compared to the national average. I'm really pleased with it.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Sian. It's just that I spotted it and I thought, that it's interesting to know, and I wondered whether there was restrictions that stopped you going to the child rather than the other way around. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah, great, thank you. So if there are no more questions from other members, I've just got a couple of points to raise. First of all, there's some really great figures, and I did want to mention about those key indicators, the immunisations particularly, but also the care leavers health summaries. To have 100% of those in place, that's really great to hear. And the increase on previous years. The dental situation, we know it's not ideal, but it isn't ideal nationally either. I know we're a bit below average, but generally speaking, it is the one where everybody struggles, isn't it? Just on the in the health assessments, when we look at the figures, the table, hang on, let me find my, had it open and now I can't find it. We know we got that drop in the fourth quarter to 37%. And you said it was, you know, because towards the end we did go into lockdown, didn't we? Sort of in the last couple of weeks of March. But actually, the quarter three is also quite low. Now, is that just, you know, is it because it's the winter? But I mean, it's quite a lot lower than it was the previous year. So is there a reason for that sort of third quarter drop?
So I did explore this myself because I was actually I was off sick during that quarter, so it was something that I then had to investigate when I came back after a period of sickness, and again it was around capacity and the clinic availability, and it seemed to drop from probably end of December and then consistently through that quarter. Now obviously we didn't know COVID wasn't a thing really until mid-February, but we did have a substantial amount of sickness.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Well, I think we know now that there was some COVID around in December, don't we? Last year. Okay, that's fine. I just thought, you know, we are supposed to be picking off a scrutiny, so I'm just raising it just to show that we are looking at the figures. That's absolutely fine, and as you said, we're still improving on that despite COVID this year. You're still doing really well with that, so that's great. The other one I just wanted to do a clarification on. I don't know, this might be Kerry, but in the point 6.1, where it talks about the number of cared for children, it says in the bullet points 22.7 lived outside the local authority area. But in the previous report, the corporate parenting report, it actually says 40% of our cared for children live outside of the area. So I
think, Catherine, what the corporate parenting report encapsulates as children that are placed at a distance. There's two definitions between children out of area and children at a distance.
Okay.
And so when you include children that are placed outside of children that are not our neighbouring in our neighbouring boroughs, the collective overall is 40% that's current. Of course, Sean's statistics are talking about last year's figures as well, so there is quite a time lapse between that. Just to offer some reassurance, really, that we don't need to worry unduly about 40% being a large number of children, because when we break that down, which we do routinely, there's a chunk of those children that live with their adoptive families, so they're safe, they're appropriately placed, that we've actually got parents that we're responsible for, where we've got the care order, but they've since moved out of Cheshire Eastern to another area, and we've still got the responsibility for them. So it's quite a complicated picture, really, but to offer that reassurance that, you know, that the 40% isn't, and you'll know from our vision for children, we want to bring as many children back as we can, but we will always have a layer of children that are out of area, because that's right for them in terms of their care planning. But well spotted.
It was it was just the difference between the figures, but I see what you're saying now. Right, okay, that's brilliant. I'm looking forward to seeing those numbers coming down for the next report that we get for the next year. I think that's all I had on that. So thanks so much for that report, Sean, and thanks for everything you've been doing. And I know that, you know, it's great to see all the quality assurance and the training and everything that's going on as well, which is going to be great for when we have our next ILACS inspection. We really can show that we've made an awful lot of progress, and you know, all these detailed analyses are really going to be helpful. So thank you so much for that and for all the work you're doing. Anybody else want to comment on this before we receive this report? No. Sally, is that just a legacy hand you have up there?
It is. I'll remove it.
Okay. Brilliant. So I propose that we accept this report on behalf of the Corporate Parenting Committee. Does anybody have any objections to that? I'll take a sense of the meeting. No objections. Okay, so that is duly noted and accepted, received. Thank you. Excellent. So moving on to our last item in the agenda, and that is the fostering report. And I believe that Kerry's going to do that for us.
I'll try and do this justice. Obviously, there is apologies from Keith. He's actually poorly with COVID, so he's resting at home, quite rightly so. So just to set the scene, really, in terms of why this is so important. So you know how many cared for children that we've got. We've already referenced today that for a population of those children, they are placed at a distance. And what we believe from research and years of actually working for these children and young people is that they're best placed in their communities, connected with their families, connected with their schools and their friends and other relationships that they've got. And so fostering in Cheshire East is important for all of those reasons. So we, sorry, Lauren, next slide, please. You'll know we took the decision following an independent fostering review to exit our relationships within Foster4, and you'll know for all the reasons around that, which I won't go into again today, from the annual report that was received into committee in, I think it was in November, actually. It was, 29th of September. But it was really important for us to have a real clear vision around what we wanted fostering to look like in Cheshire East, and we've aligned that with our Together for Children and Young People vision and strategy. So it all comes together in terms of what we want our children and what we want for them is for them to be local and to be really well cared for. So next slide, please, Lauren. So we knew that bringing the fostering, recruitment and marketing element of the role back into the local authority would need some real drive, and so set up a fostering board that was previously chaired by Jackie Sims, who was the previous director and is now part of my responsibility, and one which I thoroughly enjoy, I have to say. Seeing as part of the service move from strength to strength quite quickly is something nice as part of the challenges of the working day, really. So I now take on that responsibility, and we've also got a designated marketing officer from within our communications team, who I have to say has been fantastic and has really helped us to think about marketing as a principle and not marketing in social work, and I think that's what's led to some of the successes. Stephen Kelly is our marketing officer, and he worked tirelessly in the run up to Christmas, meeting weekly within a work stream of his own, and I think the results speak for themselves in terms of what I'll start to show you as we move through the presentation. So next one, please, Lauren. So this is the brand. You will have noticed this pictorial around, and hopefully it will have dropped through your letterboxes actually as part of the mailbox drop as we did before Christmas. But the pictures have been designed and co-produced with children and foster carers, and they represent all of the things that are just part of normal everyday life, and that what we want foster carers to do for our children is to incorporate everyday activities, really, and we're really proud of that, and I think it's now starting to be recognised in lots of different places. So when you notice that, you know, we want you to know that that is Cheshire East for fostering. So next one, Lauren. And some of the activity really that has generated the outcomes that we've already seen are the advertisement through the medium of radio, but not just in Cheshire East, and some of our neighbouring authorities. Now you'll pick up on my accent now, but the buzzies in Cheshire East have also had lots and lots of branding and our advertising on, and actually even members that sit on this committee today and lots of officers have been messaging in to say, we've seen your advert, it's really great. And so that feedback and that talk in the community has really helped, we think. We've done a mailbox drop, and you should have all received one of those through your own front doors, and again, that's been really powerful and impactful, and loads of activity on Facebook and Twitter. So I know I've been tweeting and retweeting constantly, and I think it's very difficult to measure any of these measures of activity individually, but collectively what we know is that we've seen positive results. So it's about keeping doing what we know is working well for us at the moment. So next one, please, Lauren. So can you see if this will play? We've got this is the advert that went out onto the radio. So we may not get that. Is that not going to work, Lauren?
Can't hear it.
Oh, sorry, I can hear it. I think it's only working for me.
Oh, okay.
we can send the presentation out afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, it's lovely. I won't try and do a voiceover. I won't do it justice. But it's great. It's really clear. And again, that was something that we used as part of our recruitment strategy before Christmas. So if we move on, Lauren, please. So there it is. There's the buzz. You will have seen it. And the next one again, Lauren. And this is the mail drop that we did. And it's just beautiful, isn't it? It's just that those pictures, for me anyway, just kind of, if you'd ever got a desire or even a slight curiosity, that would make you want to pick up the phone and just make an inquiry, really. And yeah, they're just beautiful little faces there. So all this has helped. So I think you can move 2 along now, Lauren. So that's just the reverse of the. So what does all this mean then? So we left Foster 4 in September, and through October and November and December, what that resulted in was 90 inquiries. So 90 times people contacted us to say, oh, what's all this about? Can you give me some more information? We then give more information, and then we then formally fill out an expression of interest, which means that people are then in our system and we are assessing them to be potential foster carers. And the next slide, Lauren, is where the good news really starts to evidence itself. So comparatively, we're 31 expressions of interest up from the same period of last year, and actually a 50% increase in what that resulted to in expressions of interest. So we've currently got 115 mainstream foster carers, and because it takes a period of time for those assessments to move through the system, within the next 3 months we will increase that to 129. That gives 14 new fostering households for children, which can't be underestimated. 14 children will have the ability to live within Cheshire East, really, and it's just, I think, something that we can be incredibly proud of. So next one, please, Lauren. So this is what we're going to continue to do, and I did put the challenge back into our marketing officer to say, I need to know what the plan looks like over the next 12 months, please, because what I don't want is for this to go away. We need this momentum to keep coming up. And what he tells me, quite rightly, is that if we do too much of a good thing, it'll become white noise. And we need to find our moments where we're really going to target that recruitment. And so that's what the adverts with Cheshire Live, Audley Edge and Wilmslow, that's what those adverts are going to strategically do. Identify points within the year where we know we're likely to have a better impact. But I suppose the ask of you is, within your roles, if you do see one of our adverts on Twitter or anywhere on Facebook, that if you would kindly retweet and repost that, the more we get that out there, the more people see it, the more interest that will generate. So next slide, please, Lauren. So as part of the process, one of the biggest things about recruiting new foster carers is how quickly you can get back to people. And what we know is that where delay creeps in, people then start to be curious about other fostering agencies and we lose their attention. So the mobile messaging app will allow us to respond in the moment. So at the moment it's through inquiries into an email box, but actually we'll have the ability and the resource within the team to be able to, hi, I'm Kerry, I'd like to be a foster carer. Somebody will come back to me straight away and we get that ball rolling in that relationship. So that, I think, will have an even stronger impact on those inquiries and the conversion rate to expression of interest. So again, that's another exciting opportunity. So next one, please, Lauren. So this is just a little bit about foster carers approvals. So we've approved 7 new mainstream foster carers compared to 4 last year, and we've got a further 14 assessments that go through to fostering panel, and we had 6 last year. So again, the evidence is very, very clear there, and I think what Keith would say if he were here is, Kerry, don't get too excited because it's early days, and actually the current climate in the current context is that there's lots of people that are not in employment, and we need to make sure that the people that are putting themselves forward to be carers are still meeting the standards that we need to be able to care for our children in the way that we want them. But we are ambitious. I think we feel like we've hit the ground running. We've set off to a really good start, and that the clear strategy and the governance of the board is really driving forward what we need to help us with our sufficiency challenges. So next one, please, Lauren. And this is also an interesting finding, really. So so you'll know that we have 143 children that live with foster carers who are external, so with fostering agencies. Around 50 of those children are matched with those carers, where we've determined that actually that's going to be their forever home until they move through to independence. But what we've noticed as part of this recruitment activity is that we've had 5 carers that have decided to leave their independent fostering agencies and come and join Cheshire East. And I think that is as much about the relationships that we're building and the offer that we've got. So Keith, as the head of service for fostering, has invested an awful lot of time in building those relationships with foster carers, who are also helping us to drive attention around recruitment and marketing. And so I think it's just demonstrating that we've become a competitor within the fostering market rather than maybe where we were in previous years. And the cost saving there is evidence for itself. Next one, please, Lauren. So again, this is just a little bit about the data that I've already talked about. So we could move on to the next one, Lauren, please. And then just a little bit really about the fostering service. So you know, there's lots of activity to approve new foster carers. There's lots of activity to then supervise existing foster carers, but the fostering service also have a role in supporting family and friends who are foster carers, looking after children who are within their own family network. So that's quite a big chunk of work and they do that tremendously well. And what we're also noticing is that young people are having a greater opportunity to stay with their carers beyond their 18th birthday. So that cohort of children that's currently at 23 is growing year on year, which means that young people aren't needing to leave their homes earlier than if they were in their natural family. And so we want to see that number grow. There's a challenge there because those foster carers are no longer foster carers, they're staying put carers. So we have to keep making sure that we've got enough people knocking on the door and so we're replenishing really the carers that are moving through to staying put. But it's a great offer for our young people. We would want them to stay in their homes. Next slide, please, Lauren. So yeah, I'm sure Keith would have done that much better justice than I have. But if there's any questions at all, then I'm happy to come back in.
Great, thanks so much, Kerry. I mean, I just found myself smiling all the way through that because it's just such lovely news and how well it's going with the fostering. Before I make any comments, does any other members wish to ask questions? Councillor Buckley?
Yeah, mine's a random thing and it's not really to do with even England. I've been watching 1 or 2 American sort of drama things and they're always saying if anyone's in foster care, but you can tell a foster kid because they move from house to house with everything in a bin bag. And I thought, I hope that doesn't happen in England.
Oh gosh, no.
There's a thing on Netflix at the moment with oh God, he's a very famous actor, Marky Mark. He used to be a singer, Mark Wahlberg. And they foster these children and they turn up with everything in bin bags. And I just thought, I hope that doesn't happen in England.
No, it doesn't. Actually, we have a policy about it. So just to be really, really clear, young people do not move with bin bag. Years ago, sadly, Councillor Buckley, that was something that happened. But let's give these young people some integrity. Let's move them in a way and plan that and work with them. If children do need to move, it does not involve bin bags.
Yeah.
I think the media sometimes portrays a kind of a stereotype, doesn't it, of fosters, particularly in America. They do a stereotype of fostered children that, you know, are delinquent and they, you know, not stable and all that sort of thing. And I think it doesn't it's not very good PR, is it, for what really happens? You know, a lot of fabulous children and fabulous foster carers. And it isn't really like that. It tells a different story, doesn't it, in reality? Okay, Councillor Holland.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just wondering whether Kerry could do a bit of myth busting, I suppose, because I think as corporate parents and being part of this committee, and if friends and family members understand that we're in that position, we might get asked questions about what makes a suitable foster carer. So, and we might not be equipped to answer that. So, you know, and there's obviously a little bit like the bin bag thing there, where, you know, oh, is that what actually happens? Can you do a bit of myth busting about what the general requirements to be a foster carer are, or are there certain criteria that you have to meet?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really really interesting question, Councillor Holland, and I think that's part of what our recruitment strategy has focused on. If you've had the chance or get the chance to look at our pictorial marketing, but also our verbal messaging, really, you need to be over 21, have the physical space to be able to care for a child, and then we will work through the rest with you. So, of course, if people have got lengthy criminal convictions, for example, it would be we would be able to identify at the very early ages when somebody was expressing an interest, actually that might not be suitable, that might not be safe. But actually, it's about being really, really creative. We don't discriminate by age, gender, sexual orientation, relationship status. We don't discriminate by any of those means, because actually lots and lots of people have lots to offer for children and young people. And I think historically in Cheshire East, there have even been myths that if you don't have a car, you can't foster children. Well, actually, of course you can. That's nonsense. You know, all you need to be able to do is to provide a home, to provide warmth, and to be able to work with colleagues in the local authority to best support these children and young people. And I personally think, and you know, my parents are foster carers, I'm quite happy to share that, and they've got, you know, I come from a very working class background, and it takes all types of carers to look after all types of children and young people. So our door is absolutely open, and what we are encouraging anybody to do is just come and have a conversation with us, really. What I might do, Councillor Holland, is make those inquiries back with the team to see whether we are being transparent enough publicly about some of those myths, because I think you've raised a really good point there. I know this, you know, and I will talk about it when I get the opportunity, but maybe we could take that a little bit further, perhaps in some of our comms. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think, because if somebody was to ask me, oh, do I have to be like in a family unit to foster, or can I be, I'm single, can I do it? I wouldn't know how to answer that, because I wouldn't be 100% certain. Sure. My initial answer would be probably not, but I'd have to find out for you. So I don't know whether it's worth us having a list of, I know it's not exhaustive, I understand that, but some things that, the common things that you get asked, well, could I do that? I'm sure you must have people coming, well, could I do that? Because I'm not actually in a relationship, I'm a single person, or, you know, those kind of things that, you know, we just don't 100% know the answers to.
Definitely. And in the meantime, yes, single people, younger people, older people, if you live on a farm, you know, or any kind of environment, because we really need to be able to match our children to our carers, and it takes all walks of life, you know, and that's the beauty of fostering.
Yeah, and I think age is really important, because some people will think they are probably too old, potentially. So I think that's worth knowing.
Yeah, there's definitely not an age cap. You know, it's about ability to be able to meet the needs of our children and young people, and actually people that have got experience in life are able to bring that experience back into reparenting these children. So, you know, it's
I'll just go on mute because my home phone's going.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that is a really good point. And I remember we did a campaign that I remember where we were trying to encourage men to foster.
Yeah.
You know, men on their own who probably think that they wouldn't even be considered, but you know they would be, and have a lot to offer, don't they? So yeah, I think it's good to kind of promote, you know, it can be anybody from all walks of life, and they don't have to be a family unit, you know, and single people, you know, we have single parents, don't we? So why would we have single foster parents?
I'll just give you a really quick example, but we had a young man, a little boy, with complex disabilities, and we needed a forever home for adoption, and he's been adopted with a single male carer, and he's the male carer adopted another boy years ago, so he's joined a family with a brother, single male carer. It challenges all those stereotypes, and he's out of care, and he's you know, living his best life. He's doing fantastically well. So I think that's a really great challenge, and I can make sure that we can myth bust and bring something back so that you're all able to take that forward.
That's great. Thank you. June.
Yeah, I wrote to Joss and I think she passed it on to, not Mark, the guy who's poorly, whose name I always forget. I always know him when I see him, but I can never remember his name. But before Christmas, I think it was, we were in one of the lully periods between lockdowns, and I met a couple of people who were like, oh, Cheshire East aren't good to foster with, and I felt I had to pass it on.
Yes.
And I keep telling people that you've totally revamped it and it's worth applying to you.
Oh,
and
you.
Recently I was talking to a lady and she was like, oh, they don't pay as well. And I thought her and her husband were doing it as a job, obviously working very hard with it, but in a way it's almost a bit of a vocation as well. You've got to have some expenses, but it's not just all about the money, is it?
No, and I think, if I'm really honest, even 12-18 months ago, we weren't where we are now relationally with our carers. There was a little bit of disgruntlement, a little bit of that came out in our inspection. But what we needed to do was accept that criticism because it was constructive. And what we've done is worked with our foster carers to say, look, what do you need from us? And we're in a much better place now. Again, you can't meet everybody's needs all of the time. And we don't have the resources to be able to compete with what independent fostering agencies can do. They only have to worry about recruitment of foster carers. As a local authority, I've got lots to worry about and have to manage my resources. One of the things that we are looking to do next year as part of our sufficiency strategy is recruit specialist salaried foster carers to prevent young people needing to go into residential to have their needs met. So carers that we pay and we say, right, you don't need a job, we're going to pay you a wage, which means that you can be at home and give all of your time and attention. So the scale in terms of skill for foster carers, and we did review our allowances and we did recognise that we needed to make some improvements, and we have now implemented that as well. But for many of our carers, Councillor Buckley, it's not all about the money. There's lots of other...
But I do keep trying to, and I had these 2 conversations within a week, I wrote to Joss because I thought, I can't let this just go.
Sure.
You need to know. And I knew you were altering, but I knew that people, the conversation they might have been basing it on could have been from 2-3 years ago.
Sure.
And you've altered. I just always feel really heartened when I'm on these things.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is all very positive, and obviously now you've rolled out the Mockingbird initiative. That gives a tremendous amount of support, doesn't it? It
does.
To foster carers, and I think that's going to be really successful in creating a kind of foster carer community.
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's really great. My one question really was about respite carers. Now, I remember meeting a couple of respite carers when one of my first things as a portfolio holder, I went to a rewards lunch for foster carers, and I sat down and chatted to a couple of ladies who were respite carers. And I think I've since heard that they stopped being respite carers. Do we have any at the moment?
We do. We have 4 or 5 respite carers. We did have one very experienced lady retire this year, but we were then able to talk to some of our other carers and say, because actually it's quite a skill set caring for children with additional needs and building that relationship up with parents, because the child's going between the 2 homes, a bit like going to stay with your auntie and uncle, really. We did need to pause at the beginning of the first lockdown because of all the uncertainty around COVID and transmission. But now we know we can manage it safely. So our children that have got respite as part of their care plans receive that now, and that hasn't altered as part of this lockdown either. We'd like more respite carers.
Kerry, could you send me some information? Because my friend did it with Stoke-on-Trent and she's still getting over it because the boy she had was quite profoundly autistic. He was non-verbal and he lived with his mum, and his mum sadly developed cervical cancer, but didn't go near a doctor until it was too late, and she died. And then she had him, my friend had him permanently with her for 6 months till he was found somewhere else, and she's teetering on the edge of doing it again, but she said it was just so harrowing that this young woman who got nobody. His mum had got nobody. She said to my friend that she was more like a mother than any mother she'd had because her own mother had died young. So it was just all a bit too tragic.
Yeah, I'm wondering if shall I send that out via our corporate parenting so everybody's got the information about how to make inquiries?
Yeah, I think that's really great, and I think particularly with respite carers, you know, I think that message needs to be going out as well, because people who don't think they could foster and commit sort of full time, you know, it's something that, you know, probably maybe some of our counsellors would consider as well, because it's a nice way to put something in and to help and to be supportive of this whole you know, the fostering thing. Without the huge commitment that some of us can't actually manage. So yeah, I think that, you know, I just wanted to raise that about the respite carers, because they do a great job, and really necessary one, doesn't it? Because some of our foster carers who have very demanding placements, you know, to give them that respite is fantastic. Great. Okay, that's really good. So any other questions for Kerry on the fostering? So some really good news. Look forward to seeing those numbers growing, and you know, and when we can actually get together with all these carers and have another awards party, that would be great.
I wonder if we'll have the Tatton thing this December.
Yeah, well, let's hope so.
Would be wonderful if we did, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. Carol?
Yes, thank you. I sent a message. I'll send you an email, Kerry, but I haven't actually been on the fostering panel yet, and I think I'm supposed to be on it. But COVID started again, and I just wondered if, I hope I haven't missed any meetings, but I just need the meeting join details to be sent to me if you want me to join. Yeah.
We would love that, Councillor Bowman. It's nothing that you've done.
Okay.
I can reassure you of that. So yeah, I can pick that up outside the meeting.
Brilliant. I know you're all busy, but that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks. Have a lovely day.
Brilliant. Okay, so that was a kind of a verbal update. We don't really have a report to receive, but just you know, on behalf of everyone, thanks so much for that, and again for all the work that you and the team are doing on them, and pass our thanks on to Keith, and wish him a speedy recovery.
Sure. Sorry, before you go, I've had an email about a DBS. Now I did that during COVID. Does it have to be done every year, or is it due again?
I was going to talk about that, Councillor Beeland, at the end. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
Just wrap up this one, and thank you for that report, and you know, as I said, you know, we'll look forward to hearing more developments on that. Just before we finish then, on any other business, I wanted to mention a couple of those things, and one of them was the DBS. We've all just had an email about requiring the DBS. Now, I will hold my hand up and say I'm one of the ones that didn't fill it in, because while I was a teacher, I had a DBS, and I kind of thought that would cover me, but now I've retired, so I do need to get that sorted out. Can you just confirm, is it an update? Is it just sent out for the people who didn't do it the first time? You know, do all people have to do it again? Do you want to confirm that for us?
Yep, sure. So we're trying to round off really what we need members to have in place in order to be out doing the frontline work that we've been bringing back and forth here around member visits and member engagement. So there's so many different activities, and actually because we're working with vulnerable children, young people, you are all required to have a standard DBS in place. So Councillor Beanland, it's once every 3 years that it then needs to be reviewed. So if you've got one in place, then no, you don't need to do another one. But what we're trying to do is get ourselves ready for when we're allowed to be back up and rolling and getting you out and about, so that you can check what we're saying is what we're doing, really. Okay. So if you could respond to those emails, we'll be happy to help with getting those forms completed.
Okay,
great.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for that clarification. And the other thing I just wanted to say before we finish is to set you a challenge. All corporate parents, we're looking for you to make a couple of, 2 or 3 promises for the 2021 as the things that you want to try and do to fulfill your role as a corporate parent. It could be anything. It could be, talking to people about talking to so many people about becoming foster parents. It could be finding referrals for apprenticeships or internships. We talked about that before, speaking to local businesses, or any number of things, you know, visiting the homes, doing some visits that we hopefully will be able to get up and running again. But if everyone wants to make 2 or 3 promises to themselves as to what they want to achieve as a corporate parent this year, and then hopefully you can tick all those off at the end of the year, so that we've all done that. So that would be great. So if there's nothing else, if nobody else has any comments or queries, we'll bring the meeting to a close. Just thank you everybody for attending, and particularly I noticed that Councillor Barber did arrive. Has he gone again?
I think so.
I think he's left. He was in, so I'm sure you'll all want to wish him all the best with his recovery, as we do to Keith as well.
Yeah.
No, it's a nasty virus when you get it. So thanks all for your attendance, and all the best, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.